Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with Frederick Payne, who died recently at the age of 104. Brigadier General Payne was the oldest of America's World War II surviving fighter aces. He also fought in Korea in 1952 and participated in some atomic weapons testing in the mid-1950s. But his major action was as a Marine Corps fighter pilot in the Pacific Theater in World War II. During 2.5 weeks in 1942, from behind the guns of a Grumman F-4F Wildcat flying over the Pacific near Guadalcanal, then Major Payne downed 3 Japanese bombers and 2 Zero fighters, having already shared credit with another pilot for bringing down an enemy bomber. When he was awarded the Navy Cross, the citation read in part, "Throughout that strenuous period when the island airfield was under constant bombardment and our precarious ground positions were menaced by the desperate counterthrusts of a fanatical foe, Major Payne repeatedly patrolled hostile territory and intercepted enemy bombing flights, downing 6 aircraft in 5 vigorous fights against tremendous odds." He was also awarded the Silver Star and the Distinguished Flying Cross. To qualify as an ace, you have to have at least 5 kills in enemy combat. Brigadier General Payne had 5.5. There are fewer than 1,500 American fighter aces from all our wars. We salute you, Brigadier General Payne, and we cannot thank you enough for your service to our country. We're going to move in a completely different direction now with Darryl Dawkins, who died recently at the age of 58. What can I say about Darryl Dawkins? Came out of high school and went right to the NBA. He was one of the first people to do that. He had a great body. He was about 6'11", 260. He was fantastically strong. Played for the 76ers for the majority of his career, but he was most well known for his power dunks. He's the father of power dunking, and it can legitimately be said that he changed basketball. On a couple of his dunks, he actually broke the backboard. In those days, the backboard was sandwiched between the rim and the stanchion that held the basket and the backboard. His dunks transmitted all the forces to the backboards, causing them to shatter, and they had to reconfigure the backboards such that the basket and the stanchion were connected and all the force was transferred to the stanchion, which could withstand the force of even the most powerful dunk. That's what Darryl Dawkins was best known for. He was a pretty good basketball player. He actually had great physical abilities, but he never really learned to play the game coming right to the pros from high school. The other thing is he was a very funny guy. He didn't take himself too seriously. He said he was from the planet Lovetron, and he gave all his dunks nicknames. They once asked him if he knew where the Declaration of Independence was signed. He said at the bottom. They asked him what his birthday was. He said January 11th. They said what year? He said every year. Here's sports writer Chris Broussard talking on ESPN about Darryl Dawkins.
His personality was just electric. Obviously, when he was a player, he was way ahead of his time. He was one of the first rappers. And there is no doubt that if he played in this day and age, or even the 90s, that he would have cut a rap album. He was a good player, no question about that. But most of the things people will remember about him were his naming of his books, the Wham Bam, Thank You Ma'am, and on, Robin Stein crying, Dawkins flying, or whatever he said. But he had some great poetry with him. He obviously broke the backboards with his dunks. A lot of people would call him one of the best game dunkers in NBA history. And had a solid career. Wasn't great, but 12.6 rebounds a game. He was just a guy that was charismatic, had tons of energy, was just a joy to be around. He was on a team that, even though they didn't win a championship, was really a legendary Philadelphia 76 team with Dr. J, Julius Erving, George McGinnis, Doug Collins, some great players on the team he played with. Of course, a lot of people remember him squaring up with Maurice Lucas in the 1977 NBA Finals. They were about to fight. Those were two of the toughest guys in the league, no doubt. I always felt like, as I watched him when he was in the league and then watching film of him after his playing career was over, I felt like if he had gone to college, remember he was straight out of high school, that he would have probably been a great player. If he had gone to college and really learned some fundamental skills, maybe learned how to play the game a little better, to utilize his strength and athleticism better, I think he could have become a great player, an all-star type center. Played on some great teams in Philadelphia with some legendary players. And, we would give him 13 points and 8 rebounds a game. And when you're playing with Dr. J and George McGinnis and Lloyd Free, at that time it was Lloyd Free, World Be Free, Doug Collins, there aren't a lot of shots to go around. So his numbers really weren't that bad.
I love Darryl Dawkins, but we did Maurice Lucas' podcast. I can guarantee when they squared off, Maurice Lucas would have killed Darryl Dawkins. Well, he did play for those great 76ers teams which never won a championship with him. Here are Dr. J, Doug Collins, and a couple other people, including Kenny Smith, talking about Darryl Dawkins. And at the end, you get a little from Shaq.
It's such a sight because the glass went everywhere, and Robinson was under the basket, and he was trying to get out of the way. He was running, and Darryl was in shock.
First thing I was thinking is, oh, man, I got to get out of here. All this glass is coming down. I was like, geez, don't fail me now.
I remember that was pretty scary because, I mean, even when you see that in slow motion, I mean, you see all this glass just coming down. That was very dangerous.
This is what's left of the Philadelphia 76ers backboard. And I know this has to be a disappointment to you and to all the fans.
Well, that's uncalled for. You know, it didn't have to happen, but that's Darryl Dawkins.
When you look at the bench and you see the one guy jump over the bench like he was coming to the bench like he was like a monster. Like, this guy just broke the backboard. I don't want to go near him.
He actually wrote poetry based on shattering backboards and glass flying, Robinson crying or something.
Glass breaking, rump roasting, rim shaking. What is it?
Babies crying, Robinson fly off.
Oh, the chocolate thunder flying, glass flying, Roseanne crying, babies crying, glass still flying, cats crying, rump roasting, bun toasting. Thank you, wham, man, I am Jay.
Doug Collins, Darryl Dawkins. Hey, he did it again. He broke it again.
The fans in Philadelphia say, hey, you did one on the road. You got to do one for us. And I kept saying, nah. They said, no, you got to do it. So I seized the opportunity. I moved in, attacked the basket, boom. And this one, the whole rim came out. So I had to get out of the way again.
Well, if you see me, I threw in the pass, and then I started sliding out of there because I knew he was going to try to tear it down.
He was empowered by this whole thing, this whole breaking of the backboard thing. I think that kind of broke him into a habit. Since he almost broke his back that time.
He just basically pulled the rim off into his hands. I mean, you see it laying on the floor. I mean, just pulled the bolts out of the entire backboard. I think after that one, I think he got the commissioner's attention.
It was like, hey, this is the commissioner. And I went to my office tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was like, uh-oh. Lawrence O'Brien called me in. He said, it's dangerous. I want you to stop doing it. If you don't, it's going to be $5,000 every time you do it. I stopped.
He changed the way they build backboards and rims. Are you kidding me? Like, because of him, there's breakaway baskets.
Darryl Dawkins is the father of power dunker. I'm just one of his sons. Probably his best son, matter of fact.
We're going to close with our feature tonight, James Red Duke, who died recently at the age of 86. Dr. Duke was the consummate Texas surgeon for over 50 years. He was the chief surgeon at the University of Texas Medical Center Hermann Hospital in Houston. He started out in divinity school. He drove a tank in the Army for a while, and then he went to medical school. He was doing his surgical residency in Dallas at Parkland Hospital on November 22nd, 1963, and he was an intermediate resident who scrubbed in on John Connolly's wounds. He didn't really do very much there. He was one of the lower level guys. People made a bigger deal about his role than they should have, but hey, he was there that day, one of the last doctors alive who tended those guys. Here's Dallas Television talking about it on the 50th anniversary.
And tonight, one of the men who was inside the trauma room, Houston's Dr. Red Duke, shares his memories. Doug Miller reports.
I don't keep house very well.
Welcome to the messy office of Dr. Red Duke. But for all the mementos crammed into this small room, there's no souvenir from the most remarkable day of a most remarkable life.
Everyone knew where they were the day they heard it, or what they were doing. And that's true of anybody of that generation.
November 22, 1963. President Kennedy's breakfast meeting with the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce was carried live on local television. But at Parkland Hospital, a fourth-year surgery resident named Red Duke wasn't paying much attention.
I don't think I was even hardly conscious of the fact that the president and his wife were going to be there.
At noon, Dealey Plaza erupted in chaos. 6 minutes later, the president's motorcade arrived at Parkland, and someone told Red Duke to head for the emergency room.
And I thought, being a typical country boy, I thought, golly, I'm going to get to meet a president.
Then he walked into the trauma room.
And I saw these people standing there, and then I saw Mrs. Kennedy seated by the door, and her clothing was stained, and I realized that this was not a good deal.
As crowds gathered outside the hospital, doctors feverishly worked on the president's lifeless body.
I right quick recognized that this was a fatal injury. I have no idea what I said, but they said, well, there's a guy across the hall needs some help.
I knew I'd been hit badly.
The guy across the hall turned out to be Texas Governor John Connally, seriously wounded by an assassin's bullet.
And I said, my God, they're going to kill us all.
But he lived to tell the story after he was treated by a young Dr. Red Duke.
It's so surreal that it doesn't make sense. That it's like an out-of-body experience. That, yeah, I was there and did all this stuff.
Of all the mementos in his office, nothing from that day. It's one story. A man with a lifetime of stories doesn't care much to tell.
He does have one brief story about the red roses that Jackie Kennedy was carrying that I want to include.
As I walked out of the room, I pulled my gloves off and threw them to a kick basin, and those roses were upside down in that kick basin, and my glove fell over.
You think about those roses?
Mm-hmm. Did this morning.
He later moved on to Houston, and his greatest accomplishment was developing the first life flight program in Texas.
In 1976, a cowboy, a fireman, and Hermann Hospital leaders launched Life Flight, the first air ambulance program in Texas. Back in the early 70s, civilian helicopter EMS, Emergency Medical Services, was revolutionary, and Houston had just launched its first city-operated EMS system. Dr. Red Duke arrived at Hermann Hospital a year before the helipad was built and was charged with creating a trauma center. Dr. Duke became a champion of the service that would soon transport critically injured or ill Houstonians to Hermann Hospital in the fraction of a time it would take an ambulance. The hospital leadership saw the potential and took it upon themselves to raise money to launch a helicopter EMS service. Through this determination, Life Flight was born. There were no models or procedures to follow. EMS flight crew positions didn't exist. Dr. Duke and his team spent months devising medical safety and communication protocols for the fledgling program. Spearheading the new venture, Dr. Duke was named the first medical director of Life Flight, a title he still holds today. With one helicopter and one telephone on the triage nurse's desk, Life Flight flew its first mission on August 1st, 1976. 3 flights the first day, 45 the first month, and it just kept going.
The time frame that it takes for us to get the patient and bring them back could be the difference in life and death.
The busiest air ambulance program in the country, Life Flight became Memorial Hermann Life Flight in 1997. Today, Life Flight has a fleet of 6 helicopters, 16 pilots, 7 mechanics, 17 flight nurses, 12 dispatchers, and 17 flight paramedics. And it now serves communities within 150 miles of the Texas Medical Center. As of this year, its dynamic pilots, nurses, and paramedics have completed more than 140,000 patient missions and saved countless lives. Dr. Red Duke, Memorial Hermann's Life Flight, our heroes in the sky for almost 40 years.
So well known, he was the model for the 1987 television show Buck James, starring Dennis Weaver as a Texas surgeon.
What seems like a good life to one man just ain't enough for the next.
Get down in there, try and stop the bleeding. Watch your eyes, he could go off like cheap champagne.
Some folks need to walk in more than one world.
You're not my doctor. You're supposed to be my phone. Stop it. Supposed to be. Stop it.
Is it just that you don't give a damn for the image of this hospital?
I don't give a damn for politics is what I don't give a damn about. Trick is to straddle them both at once.
Dennis Weaver is Buck James, Sunday on ABC.
And Dr. Duke was a real-life TV doctor also.
You know, there's something about a really beautiful sunny day that makes most of us just want to get outside and enjoy it. But you also got to admit, you may not always be doing your skin a favor.
And he always signed off the same way.
From the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, Dr. Red Duke.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. Since Dr. Duke was a cowboy, we're going to close with the guy who sang about cowboys better than anybody, Marty Robbins. As a tribute to Dr. Duke, here's Marty singing about another city in Texas, the streets of Laredo.
Oh, beat the drum slowly and play the fife low. Sing the death march as you carry me along. Take me to the valley